Because, you do have to call it when you see it. And sometimes it's in really subtle ways. I'll just talk about my own boring life for a moment if I can. In fact, International Women's Day breakfast, I was making the 4 lunch boxes. That's exciting. But I've got 4 kids, 2 boys and 2 girls, and I think it would be really sad if I dropped them off at school every day and I said, bye guys, have a great day, and by the way, boys, you're going to do a lot better just because you've got a penis. I think that would be, quite sad, but unfortunately that's the reality. But, you've got to call it when you see it. I got a note home the other day from school asking for mums to volunteer in the canteen. Mums, have you got any time to volunteer in the canteen? And so I called that. Can you imagine having me as a parent at school? Honestly, it was terrible, the poor woman, though. She was just shaking in her boots. But I said, seriously, you've got to look at this. Why don't you just call for parents? Why don't you just ask people? Why does it have to be a gender thing? I do volunteer for the canteen. I have to restrain myself when the fat kids come up and try and order slushies. I really have to say, I do say there's a better choice for you to be making. Again, that's probably why I haven't been invited back this year on the canteen committee. But, I couldn't volunteer one day for the canteen. I was quite busy, but my husband was at home polishing his golf balls. And so I said to him, well, darling, why don't you go down and do canteen duty? And so he's a good man, and he said, yeah, that's completely fine. And he went down and started doing canteen duty, and what was hilarious was that everyone in the canteen was like, oh my God, he is so amazing. What a fantastic husband you've got. He is so incredible. In fact, I'm surprised that the canteen didn't nominate him for Australian of the Year just then and there. And I'm like, well, he has been to university for 17 years. If he can't manage a batch of pikelets, we're all fucked. Like, seriously. It's like it's not that hard. So my point is, after that long and boring story, call it when you see it. It's not just up to government policy makers to make policies. It's up to each and every one of us, wherever we go, wherever we see it, to say this is not acceptable. Possibly in a better way than I would say it, but nonetheless. So there you go, I'll get off my high horse now. Our next speaker is David Reynolds. He is the Chief Executive, Treasury and Finance. He is also the DTF Executive Sponsor for both Innovation and Women in Treasury. In his previous role as South Australian Deputy Under Treasurer, and I love that term, Under Treasurer. I've never been under a Treasurer. I wonder how that would feel. Maybe you can tell me later. He was responsible for the South Australian government budget process and supporting the Treasurer and the government in its decision-making. His responsibilities also include government accounting and reporting and Veterans SA. He has 2 daughters, Erin, who is 9, and Laura, who is 7. So gender equality is very important to him. Please welcome David Reynolds to the stage.
Good morning all, thanks Amanda. I won't spend long talking about what it's like to be an under-treasurer. I'll leave that to you. So it is interesting because when I took over the role a bit over a year ago, the position title was under-treasurer and I changed it to chief executive for that exact reason. Mind you, the current treasurer still calls me under-treasurer. I think he likes it even if I don't. So this morning, my task really is to take what Scott's done and talked about the whole of government gender equality strategy, which is what we're part of. And I'm going to talk briefly about what we've done in Treasury and importantly the really action items, the steps that we've done, the practical things to make this a reality. Because it's always good to come and talk about it and we're all on board to know the objective and particularly everybody here. But how do we actually go about delivering this and how have we done that in Treasury? So I'm just going to talk about a few examples of things that we've done under our strategy. Because a year ago we released our gender equality in Treasury strategy. There it is there. And it really sets out a bunch of actions because that's the way we went about doing this. This is culture change. This is making a difference about the way we do it. And say, how do you do culture change? You do actions. So we set out a bunch of actions to make a difference in how we do it. I'm going to have a go at the technology and see if I can manage it better than Scott. Look at that, first time. That's it. So firstly, you talk about gender equality, and I'm glad that Scott talked about all the numbers so I don't have to talk about numbers, because usually that's my gig and I'm happy to talk about something else. For us, it's really easier than this. It's not about, people say, it's a moral crusade to go and get gender equality. This isn't a moral crusade the way I see it. This isn't about that at all. This is about results. All the evidence, there are hundreds of reports. You can search the internet, you can go and find them and stack them up in a huge pile, which show very simply you get better results when you've got diversity around the table talking about issues. And for me, this is that simple. If you walk into any chief executive's office, you walk into any boardroom and you say, you know what, I can get you better outcomes for exactly the same money, and I mean exactly the same money, should fix gender pay gap, absolutely. For exactly the same amount of money, you can get better outcomes. You can't deny that. You say that is where we want to be. And that's what this gender equality scheme for us is absolutely about. Let's just get better results doing exactly the same thing. Targets. When we first started this, and I think this debate has slipped away a little bit, people were sort of saying, do you set a target or don't you set a target? What's the right way to go about achieving this? And for us, it was clearly about setting a target. If you don't set a target, you don't know where you're going, you can't measure your objective. It was don't just change things and hope you get there, set yourself a target. Then we had quite a debate, and I've seen some of these where people set interim targets. Treasury started a year ago and our gender equality was very, very poor. We had about a third of female representation in our leadership group, and that's clearly not good enough and not even close to good enough. So we said, we need a target. And people said to me, well, you can't go from a third to 50% because that's just too big an ask. People won't believe you. And I said, of course we can. You don't need an interim target, and I don't want to be talking about 42% by 2018 or something. This is about equality. The right thing to talk about is to talk about 50-50. So I said, if I have to push the year out a fraction so I can talk about 50-50, that's what we need to do, and that's exactly what we've done. So our goal is to get 50-50 gender equality and leadership by the year 2020. It's nice and easy to remember for those with numbers, 50-50 by 2020, and to get that outcome. And for us, that meant the ASO 7 and above group. Why? We looked at the numbers. We had gender equality up to ASO 6, and from there it petered off and got worse as you got up through the rungs. So we said that is our goal. We were at 33% this time last year, and today we're at 42%. So we've increased that significantly in the space of under a year, and we're well towards that target, and we're going to smash that well before we get to 2020. So what have we done about it? One of the things is in our recruitment and training area, and we've, as everyone does, you put a lot of effort into what these things will look like, making sure you get opportunities for our female employees and the opportunities that we need to give to all our staff, make sure they get their share of the training budget. But one of the things we did was really important is we said we're going to make clear and have to interview at least 50% women for every job that we do. Every job we advertise. And people go, oh, that's really hard because it's like Treasury kind of roles, it's male dominated. Rubbish, complete rubbish. It's 50-50 and we're going to interview for every position. This has probably been the most controversial when we go and talk to our staff. How? What if all the applications you get are from men? What do you do then? Do you have to sort of scrap the process and start again? So I say, well, think about it for a while. First, you need to manage the process from the beginning. Think about who you can get to apply for a position, what they look like. But a really good example of this came from me when we interviewed and we advertised for a Chief Technology Officer, so head of our IT area, a traditionally male-dominated area. So we got in about 50 applications, wound them back to about 20. People like me who aren't very IT savvy then go, well, I don't know really much about these. But some IT people read them. They came up with a list of the top 6. They were all men. I went, well, that's not good enough. Take it back. Have another go. So I said, but how? How do we do this? This is where we've got to. I said, well, how do we do this? The panel went like this. It said, all right, let's find the top 6 women that applied for the job. So they found the top 6 women that applied for the job and the top 6 men that applied for the job. And then the panel, of which I was not a member, the panel then took and said, all right, let's speed interview these people, the 12 of them, because no one's going to have time to interview 12 people in length. Let's speed interview them. So bring them in, 15 minutes each, one question. Okay, if you're running our IT service, what does customer service look like? So they took those 12 people, brought them in and said, all right, what does customer service look like? By the time they'd finished this speed interviewing with the 12, the ones they really wanted to interview were 5 women and 1 man. Completely different. And why? Because they got them in the room and said, okay, what do these people know in terms of what they can deliver for us? It was a really powerful demonstration of actually this can happen in reality. They ended up interviewing 3 and 3. And in fact, we appointed a female director as our Chief Technology Officer, and Jeanette's in the room here somewhere. I saw her earlier. It's one of those lessons. You don't let people say the practical stuff can't work. You find ways to get through the practical questions. It can be done. The other one for us is succession planning. If you want to make sure you've got the people applying for the jobs, think about succession planning. It's something the public sector is now putting a push on to say, how do we do good succession planning? So we've done this, again, really simple ways. How do we make this work for us in the way that we can get the best outcomes? So succession planning in Treasury looks like this. I get you, and all the executives have done this, you write your name on a piece of paper. Underneath your name, I want you to write 4 other names. These are the people who say, if you left your job today because you got some remarkably better offer than working in Treasury, which I find hard to understand, but let's pretend that happens. If you go and leave today and work somewhere else, who are the 4 people that should be interviewed for your job? Who should we go to? We need 2 of them to be women, 2 of them to be men. They don't have to be inside Treasury, they can be anywhere, inside government, other governments, private sector, anywhere. Who are the 4 people? And who are they? 2 men, 2 women. This forces people to think about what does the chain look like? What does the future pool of applicants look like for this position? And then, of course, you say to yourself, okay, so the women that are on that page, where are they? If they're inside government, we need to be talking to, if they're in our organisation, talking to our own managers saying, make sure these women have the opportunities. They're our future leaders. The same if they're outside in other parts of government. I'll call those other parts of government and say, this person's on our list. We think they're a future leader. Can we make sure we're getting opportunities? What can we do? Can we have swaps and other things to try and get opportunities for those women to work through and get the skills that they need? So it's a really tangible, practical way to do it, and it makes succession planning simple. I didn't get any pushback. It was nice and easy for people just to think about who it is who can replace them and get that list done. So we'll be talking some more about that at SMC as well. It's about a way to progress that and you get the gender equality as part of the succession planning. Flexibility. Clearly flexibility is a part of what we do in terms of getting gender equality and outcomes. So for us this means how do we get flexible roles happening? One of the things about flexibility is goes, oh, but we've all got part-time. Everyone's had that for years, everyone can do it. It's a culture thing. You've got to be saying this is okay to have flexible working arrangements for people. And I know that one of the most interesting things that happens when I've been a manager through the years is when people walk into your office and they want to ask for flexible working of any kind, the look in their eye, they look scared, they look worried that this is a huge thing that they're doing and they're asking for something that is really big and important and they're thinking, will this disadvantage my career? Will the boss not like me anymore? Is this going to give me all sorts of problems that I don't really want, but I need to do this for myself? And it's a really challenging thing for people to do. And I think that's not the kind of organisation that I want to lead. We want to say this is an organisation that supports people to work flexibly. And so this is something that we want to do with our people. So to help us get around that, what we do every 6 months is send an email to all our staff saying, this is a reminder, we like flexible working arrangements. We're keen for everyone to work flexibly. If you want to work flexibly, hit reply to this email. It goes to our HR area. You don't have to go and see your manager. It goes to HR. They get the list of people that say, okay, I'm interested in changing my working arrangements to work flexibly. That list from HR comes to my Chief Operating Officer and it's her job to go and say, okay, here's the list of people. Go and talk to each manager and say, this person's now going to be working flexibly. It's interesting, no pushback. We had 18 people in that first round apply to do that, and every single one of them within the week had arranged their flexible working hours. And that's the really important step. You've got to deliver. You know, if we'd have gone back and said, oh, half of them did, half of them didn't, no point, right? Every single one has to deliver. And of course, what did that do? Within a month after that, another 12 people had said, you know that email that I got? I want that too. Because they were a little bit scared that this wasn't really what we meant. You've got to prove you mean it and then people can follow. And it wasn't just female with children, part-time, those type of arrangements. It was all sorts of things. A third of those people were men that wanted to work more flexibly, and that's great. One of my favourite examples was someone whose partner does shift work. And they said, I want to work part-time and then I want to work different hours so I can actually spend some time with my partner. I thought, what a great outcome. So now that person, 3 days a week, effectively works shift work. And therefore they can spend some time with their family. And you go, what a great outcome. And I always see this part-time. I know a lot of managers still go, oh, part-time, I worry about it. I think this is a gift. I mean, I think I've just made, that's a bit personal, the whole department has made 30 people happier. Now in Treasury, we don't tend to make people happy. Why are you all laughing? I'm sure we make you all happy, but you know, it's not what we're known for. But we've made 30 people happier. And happier people give you better outcomes. We all know how this works. You get better employed, happy staff, you get better outcomes for yourself. This absolutely pays back to us to get the results that we need. So we like to make people happy in Treasury. You can think about that. And if all the chief executives in the room can forget I said that, that'd be really handy. So it's the kind of things that we do. It's the same as people who are leaving early on a day because they work part-time. One day I was leaving early to go and pick up my kids from school. I felt incredibly guilty as I was walking out the door going, it's like 3:30 in the afternoon, I feel guilty for leaving early, like there's something wrong with this. And I started explaining to the person in the lift, it's all right, I'm just going to get my kids, like it mattered. You go, this is just very strange. I thought, does everybody feel this guilty when they leave early? Does that mean our part-time people feel this guilty every time they leave early or come in late? That's a horrible feeling. I don't want to work in an organisation that makes people feel like that. So we need to say to our people, it's okay. So I've said to all of my reports and all the managers, and very clear, if you're leaving early, I don't want you to grab your bag and sneak out the door. I'm going to grab your bag and walk all the way around the floor, past every one of your staff members, and walk out the door. Head held high, because this is something that we support because it's important to do. And it's those demonstration effects that we need to do. And really, that is my message here. When we talk about what our gender equality and leadership thing looks like, this is about culture change. There are things you can do, and it's about doing those practical things and making them happen. If anybody comes across and you'll get staff members who say, I don't really like this, no, not interested. These things are doable. They absolutely, that's the word that Scott used, and he's so right. These are doable, and you do it by practical steps. It's culture change. Everything you do matters, and you've got to make everything matter and do it in the right way to get the change that we want. Thank you.